Now, as you probably know, music isn't always continuous sound. Sometimes things go quiet. In musical terms, we call that a rest. Now, the combination of notes and rests produces sound and silence within a musical composition. The duration of musical silence is indicated by different types of rests. Rests are used to show periods of silence in a measure. Each type of rest shares a duration within a certain type of note. Here we have a chart of all the major rests. Here above we have a whole note. And this sign here, this little box that's hanging from the fourth line, is called a whole rest. Now this over here is a half rest, and that connects to the half note here above. So these connect to this lower string here. So this scribble here is called a quarter rest, and that applies to the quarter note. This is an eighth rest. It applies to the eighth note. It has the same duration as the eighth note. This is the 16th rest, and it connects with the 16th note here. As you can see, the rests of the 8th and 16th notes have similar flags on the end here. There are two signs on this stem and one little dot and a scribble here, just as the 8th note has one flag and the 16th note has two flags. To explain this, we have filled out all these measures with notes. There are no rests in this musical example, just continuous music. What we'll do to explain this a little better is that we will replace some of these notes with rests. And the rests that we will use will be of the same length duration as the notes here. So you can understand how rests are used inside of a musical composition. First of all, before we start taking out the notes and putting rests instead, let's listen to this example as it is. Now in the background you could hear a metronome. That's simply to make the example a little more clear. Now when I take out the notes, you will hear the metronome instead. But as I said before, the metronome is simply to keep the beat of the music going. Now let's start taking out some notes and putting rests instead. I'm going to start off by taking some of these quarter notes out here. Now as you noticed, I took out the second quarter note and I put a quarter rest instead. I'm going to do a little more than that. I think I'll take this one too and put a rest instead. So we have rests on the second beat and fourth beat of this bar. This is a bar, as you can remember. Here is a bar line, and here is a bar line. So let's take a listen to this and see how it sounds. Now you could hear how the notes suddenly stopped appearing here. But you could hear the metronome clicking in the background, and that's okay. That's just to let you know there's a beat going on, but you couldn't hear any notes. So what we've simply done here is we took out these two notes and we replaced them with silence. Now this sign, this quarter note rest, equals the length duration of this quarter note. So if I take out this note, I will have to put a quarter note rest instead. But what happens if we try the 8 notes? Now I'm going to take out some 8 notes here and listen to how the example sounds. Now probably, as you could hear, you noticed that these notes were missing. It was simply replaced by rests. There was nothing instead. So let's see what happens if we take out the longer notes. For example, this half note here. Now as you can see, the half note has been replaced by the half rest. And the half rest is a box sitting on the 3rd line. Now when we listen to this example, you will hear the metronome going twice, because the metronome is counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and he plays through this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and then the rest will appear, and you will hear the metronome, where the 3rd and 4th beat of the bar appear. Let's take a listen. So you're starting to get the idea, right? Next, we'll take out this whole note. When we take out the whole note, we will have to put a whole rest instead. So let's check it out. And that's a box hanging from the 4th line. Now what you will hear when we play this example is simply the metronome counting 4 beats when we see this rest. There's no note. We took the note out and we put a rest instead. When we take a note out of a piece of music, we have to put a rest that's the same value instead. Let's take a listen. So in this example you could hear the metronome clicking 4 beats all alone here in the first bar before we got to the half note here. Now we've been messing around with these bars, so let's try taking out some 16 notes. That kind of can sound a bit weird. Now here I've taken out some notes and put some 16 rests instead. Now this will sound a bit interesting. And even though you don't understand completely what's going on here, the main thing is to understand the principles behind the theory. That if you take out a note and you want to replace it by a rest, the rest has to be of the same duration as the note. Let's take a listen. And here we see a chart of the different durations of rests. On the top we have the whole note rest, dividing into 2 half-note rests, that each of them divides into 2 quarter-note rests, that divide into 8-note rests, that again divide into 16th rests. This is exactly the same system as used with the note values, if you can remember from a lesson earlier. So that's it about rests for now.